today I'm going to show you how to create this kind of brutal degloving injury to the finger. Basically, a degloving happens, in this case on the finger, when most of the skin is torn away from the rest of the musculoskeletal unit. The most common causes of this happening are in road traffic accidents, usually if someone's hand gets caught underneath a tyre. The other thing is in machines. And the other common cause of degloving injury involving a single finger is when someone is wearing a ring and the ring gets caught in something, so it just basically pulls all of the skin off the finger. So the way this trick is made is basically hiding a finger in some kind of cloth or tissue or fabric where you can slide the finger through a slot, and then you put up a fake finger on the top. So for mine, I'm using some medical grade stuff that looks more authentic. So I've got the little sheet of adhesive medical paper, but it didn't look good enough by itself, so I wrapped a bandage over the top of it, cut a hole through it, and slid my ring finger through it. So a tip is that when you've got your finger like half glued on, it's hard to open up everything with one hand. So basically I would suggest opening up your bottle of wax and getting the wax out first, and opening up your bloods and your glues and all of that, so that you don't have to try and do it with one hand. And to adhere, I'm going to use Telesis 5. You can also use spirit gum or Prozaid. I'm having a recent love affair with Telesis. You basically want to apply the glue where you're going to stick your nub and a little bit further along, so basically everywhere that the nose and scar wax is going to be blended out onto, you want to have adhesive over it. I'm going to create, first of all, just a rough shape of a little kind of nub left. I always want to call this part a muscle, but there are technically no muscles in the finger, so it's just I guess flesh. So I'm going to smooth that out a little bit on the bottom just to stick it, and then I'm going to create a second part of wax, which is going to be the finger, so kind of the retaining wall around it, so then it's like a ledge where it moves into the flesh. So I'm going to start with my spatula and my fingers, coated with a little bit of Vaseline, which helps to smooth it out, just to smooth out this nose and scar wax, so it's just kind of blended into the skin around it quite seamlessly. I'm going to make sure that ledge is pretty tight. I feel like it was a little bit too thick, so I've carved away a little bit of the fleshy part, and I'm just redefining that ledge or that wall where it's the skin versus the inner flesh. And try different tools to see what helps you to blend it out. So I've used a couple of different tools. This is a dental spatula, a dental tool that I'm using to try and carve it out. Fingers work pretty well. Makeup spatulas work pretty well. I'm going to go in and try and make that skin look like the rest of my hand, and that mostly involves putting in all of the lines of the hand. So with this, I'm also going to use a sponge to try and make the texture not as smooth, so it's got a little bit of bumpiness to it. And then I'm going to use a bunch of different tools just to kind of gently and softly put these lines, just following the lines that are already in my hand. I'm also trying to use a makeup brush here to smooth out those lines and get away any of the wax boogers, and just soften it a little bit. Here's another dental tool, so just basically try with the tools that you have, see what helps. Now for this part in the original image was a tendon, and I thought, because it was quite thin and quite translucent and quite soft, that using sculpt gel would be really cool to create that part. So I did make a semi-transparent white tendon looking thing out of silicone, out of sculpt gel, but it didn't cure in time. It took hours to cure, so something inhibited the cure. So basically I ended up grabbing my white coloured wax, which is called bone wax, and trying to create the tendon with this had a little bit of issues, because it's obviously going to be a little bit thicker, because it's hard to get it as thin as the silicone because it just kind of sticks to everything, and it's going to be a lot more opaque, and not have that kind of soft see-throughness, and so this ends up in it looking a bit more like a bone than a tendon. But either way, having some flesh, having some veins, having a white thing, it all kind of looks quite, look more like something that might be anatomically correct. I'm going to put a little bit more of the nose and scar wax down the bottom, just so it looks like it's coming out of something rather than it's just being laid on top of something, just to kind of embed it a little bit better. I'm going to texture the wax a little bit, so it's got this kind of fleshy ripped upness to it. I'm using both my tools and my brushes just to kind of yeah, just to texture the surface a little bit. Now for the colouring, I'm going to use translucent thin washes of Skin Illustrator. This is my light flash tones palette. I'm going to start out using quite diluted washes of the pinks, the Coral Adjuster and the Rose Adjuster. I'm going to use my stipple brush to stipple on some of the natural one tone, and a little bit of the blues to match the veins in my hand, and a little bit of the ivory colour to match the splotchiness of my skin. You see it's got quite a few highlights and then quite a few red splotches, and so we're trying to match that. Next I'm going to go in and try and paint the muscly colour, so I'm going to put some of the Coral Adjuster and the Rose Adjuster, again quite diluted, thin translucent layers because I don't want it to be too monotonous. And it's okay to go over the white bit in the centre because you don't want the white bit to be completely white or look out of place. So I'm just going to go over the skin again and put a little bit more of the blotchy red tones. And I'm going to go over with my finger and put in some of the lightest flesh tones like the ivory colour, just to try and get that blotchiness coming through by patting it with my finger. And then putting some more of the Rose Adjuster too, because you can see my skin's quite blotchy. Now I'm mixing in the Skin Illustrator blood colour with the from the FX palette with the Rose Adjuster colour, so it's not too bright pink and not too dark red. It's kind of this in-between muscly colour, and I'm just putting some thin washes over the muscle part, and if I feel like I built up the colour too much and it's not enough variation, I go over it with a cotton tip dipped in isopropyl alcohol just to remove back some of that colour. I'm going in with some more of the blood tones. I'm going to apply some of the dark blood tones now, just in little splotches around to try and deepen some areas, especially around the base, and then again removing some of the colour so it's got some variation in it. Make sure you go all around the sides, it's not spots missing. And I'm going to go in with some wool, some red wool, to create this kind of vein texture over it all. So first we want to separate the wool. My wool was a little bit too bright red, so I've dipped it in some blood, in some darker coloured blood, and this will make it look more like a veiny colour, and also will help it to stick temporarily to the wax because of its wetness. So I'm just going to cut off little tiny strips of varying thickness and place a couple over. I'm not going too crazy because you don't want to cover up all of your wet, but just a couple for, you know, a textural variation because it looks kind of cool. So I'm going to put some Posate adhesive over it, just to firmly attach it down onto the wax so it doesn't kind of fly away when you're putting other stuff on top. And while that was drying, I went over just the wrinkles in the hand again. I tried to smooth out the edges a little bit more. Decided that I just really wanted to redo it all, so I've kind of gone over my fingers and just really smoothed it out quite a bit more on my spatula, which removes a little bit of the colouring, and then gone back over it again with my dental tools, my sponge, and then it needs a little bit more of the flesh tones and a little bit more of the pinks just to get it to match a little bit better again because I've removed that colour. And again, I'm finding that dotting it on with my finger gives it more of that blotchy feel, more of the ivory kind of highlights over it. Just using the stipple brush on my fingers to try and get that splotchy colour to get it to match. Now I'm going to use some KY jelly, just to put over the stumpy bit so it gets this really gross kind of goopy shiny feel that ordinarily the blood would give, but so that we don't completely cover it in blood and hide all our work. I'm just going to place a little bit of blood, and this is the aged blood, mostly at the base of the finger, and just a couple of dots around the top and the sides, and then some dribbles down the side and into just the creases of the finger. Again, this is just copying the reference image. So I feel like it's worth noting right now, the reference image was taken by a medical professional in a hospital, so this is going to be like an hour or two after the accident happened. The blood is no longer coming out, the bleeding is controlled. A lot of the blood would have been washed away by a nurse or a doctor, leaving just these little kind of minute traces of blood around, but otherwise a pretty clear view of what's happened as an injury. And I feel like this is more interesting to look at than the initial red bloody mess that's a bit indistinguishable. And so you see that I wipe it away a couple of times and then put a little bit more down just to get this kind of build up of this trace of blood. And that's the finished makeup. And so I'll do a second tutorial on how I created the degloved finger, because this is already pretty long. I'll link it in the description box and at the end of the video. And obviously you don't have to include the finger, but I feel like the two together, you know, tell a story, I guess. It's a kind of a complete thing. So this is a detail shot of the goopy, muscly mess. So you can kind of see how the wool and the white coloured wax interact with the colouring and the lube and the blood. That's a weird sentence. And this is it without the finger, so obviously you can also do this. And one of the benefits of doing it this way is that you're not restricted to a table as you were with the severed fingers. So if you want to go to a Halloween party or a Comic-Con or some kind of costume where you need to not be limited by a table, you have to be able to move around, then this is a more suitable injury for that purpose. I also think it's worth noting that because it is nose and scar wax, you will probably have to carry it around like it is a real injured finger and be really gentle, or else you can kind of damage all of the work you put into it. If you want to be using that hand more and you're worried about damaging the wax, you can use a more durable substance such as silicone. If you have a little bit more money to spend on it, you can do a build-up technique with Sculpt Gel or 3rd degree. Then those are going to be a bit more durable and longer lasting, and once the silicone's cured, it keeps its shape. Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video and you learned stuff, and I will link the second video now. Alright, thanks for watching, bye guys.